Hi, my name is Stefan, and you're listening to Catholic versus Atheist.
Talk a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you believe, and why you believe it.
Working stiff family man, raised, I guess, Catholic, at least culturally Catholic. I believe in love, the pleasures of life. I believe in death. I believe in evolution. I believe in science. I'm pretty scientific minded. I have a scientific background. I believe in the love I have for my children, my family.
Basically anything that you can experience or test.
Yeah, pretty much everything I can experience or test, yeah.
Was there a time where you believed in the God that I worship?
Not really. No, I never felt it anyways, right? I mean, it was taught to me.
Did you go through the motions of going to church as a child?
Very little, sort of a
Christmas and Easter?
Yeah,
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. It was ostensibly a Catholic school, I guess. So we said a prayer every morning. It's just by rote. We would repeat, Je vous salue Marie, pleine de grâce, blah, 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 blah. And then
Did you not pray at night going to bed?
very rarely.
Were you invited to pray by your mother, for example?
No.
No? Who would you say has more faith, your mother or your father?
My father.
Now and when you were
my
growing
father's
up?
deceased. My mother actually went to she was trained as a nurse and was educated by nuns. And lived in a convent, essentially. Oh. And there was pressure on her to become a nun, even, indirectly at least. No one was forcing and twisting her arm. And she was part of this generation that, in Quebec especially, that really rejected Catholicism, right? She's of that generation. So she rejected it wholeheartedly. And to this day, she's very anti-church. And my father, who was deceased, but he had a much more curiosity about the subject, especially in the last years of his life.
Okay.
So he would start going to church on his own, right? Just say, I'll go have a look and see what's going on and listen to what the priest has to say. So, but as I was growing up, he never really went to church. It's just later on in his life, when I was an adult and already moved out of home, that he would start attending church services once in a while.
So it was never an issue of conflict between your father and your mother, because it wasn't a big deal?
No.
It was just a growing interest near the end of his life.
Yeah.
The approaching death, was that a factor?
It was even before he knew he was sick. This interest was growing in his heart, I guess.
As he approached death, was spirituality something that he was attached to, in terms of hope of an afterlife or something like that?
I don't get that sense.
No.
Maybe it was, but we never discussed it, and it wasn't like a deathbed conversion or anything like that. No. The death was a cancer, very violent and fast, and I don't think he had any energy to even contemplate the higher order of things. Maybe he did. I don't know. Right? We didn't discuss it. But.
Do you feel more like your mother or more like your father in your personality?
I'd say more like my father, I would assume.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about your home life with your wife and kids and what role the church plays in that?
Sure. Well, my wife is a practicing Catholic. She wants, to raise our children as Catholics. So she attends church services. She tries to convince the children to go with her, and once in a while, and she's very involved in her church, and she raises our children as Catholics.
But what effect has that had on you, just in terms of day-to-day living?
Well, she likes to say a prayer before meals, for example. I think that's fine, right? It's often a prayer of thanking God for the bounty that we have, and asking God to help others that aren't so fortunate, right? And I agree with that wholeheartedly, right? I mean, in the sense that I am grateful for the bounty that I have in my life, right? Abundant food, warmth, clothing, security. I'm very thankful for that. So I don't mind thanking God, even though I don't really know what that means, or even really care that much. I like to be thankful, right, for what I have. And I like to, feel for others that aren't so fortunate and hope that things turn out better for them, right? So again, to me, God, I don't know if he has any role in this or whatever, but it doesn't matter to me, right? I just want to express. I like expressing that hope,
In your heart of hearts and maybe some of your darkest, loneliest moments, have you ever reached out to God out of desperation, even though you don't believe?
Yeah, I've done that.
Okay.
Sure. When things are really good, I tend to reach out to God, so to speak, to be thankful, right? It's like, what have I done to deserve this?
That's nice.
And when things are going bad, I swear at God, quote unquote, and say, why are you doing this to me? So self-pity and so on and so on. But it's not like in a time of desperation, I don't call out for help. And that's never been something, strangely, that that I've done.
Okay.
In a time of desperation, I damn God.
Okay.
And in good times, I'm thankful for God.
Yeah. So how do you explain your existence? Where do you think you came from?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's something that I've thought about quite a bit, right? From the point of view of science, obviously, right? And I've studied geology a lot, the history of time, and the dust that was this planet before it consolidated and became a planet, and how there was no oxygen on this planet. It was just a ball of hot magma until it cooled off and had a crust, and eventually water, and eventually oxygen, and eventually unicellular beings, and then eventually multicellular organisms, and eventually more and more complexity, right? So the belief of where I come from is that soup, and where did that soup come from? I don't know, right?
Okay.
It's another question that really don't know, right?
Would you say it's...
But I just have to add that I'm not uncomfortable not knowing that, Like, it's the same on the other end of life, right? When I die, and I know I will die, right? I'm not anxious about knowing what is in the afterlife. I'm assuming there's just nothing, right? I'm here for a discrete period of time, and whatever, right? Make the best of it, because it's only going to last for me another 40 years, and then...
How do you explain morality if there is no consequence, no lasting consequence to the choices you make?
I tend to look at it evolutionarily, like I do choices to help my offspring, essentially, and I think that as you're building organisms, the best way to do is just to help each other out for the survival of the entire species, right? But I know that there's weaknesses in that argument, obviously, because we're destroying the planet we live on, right? As collectively, that's what we're doing. There is certainly some choices that feel better than others as well, right? And I know that when I hurt people, it doesn't feel as good as when I help people, right? Now, why is that? I don't know, right? Is that just, again, biology, evolution, that, we're... Or not, I don't know. But I know that there is evil, right? We see it every day. We see, there's a terrible war going on in Syria right now, and we see the refugees flooding, trying to escape, and we see ourselves, the Western world, doing not very much about it, right? So that makes me feel guilty as well, right? Like, why am I not doing more to help my fellow citizens? I feel cheap, in my nice, comfortable bubble of the Western world in a warm house with a nice job and a nice family. It doesn't feel good to do nothing, right? So I could do nothing, which is an okay choice. I could hurt people, which would be the worst choice, morally, I guess. And I could do even better, right? I could help, actually make an effort and sacrifice myself to help others, which is, I realize is the right choice, but I don't really do it that much.
There's a principle in Christianity which is to deal with your immediate surroundings. Like, so you have kids, so your first responsibility is to your wife and kids. And you have a job, so your responsibility is to go to your job. So there's a sort of danger that some people fall into where they think that it's in Africa or Asia that they need to be helping those poor people over there. So I think you're doing a good job, and you're doing a lot, you're contributing, and you are sacrificing. But I want to talk a little bit about the universe and geological time. And I think you will agree that there was a time in the universe where there was no biological life, right?
For sure, yeah.
And I think you will agree also that there's a time in the future where biological life is no longer sustainable.
On this planet, you mean?
In the universe.
In the universe? I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily say that.
Entropy? You've heard of entropy?
Yeah, I've heard of entropy for sure. And will the universe peter out? I guess. I don't know. But yeah, maybe it'll peter out.
Do you think that life comes from non-life, meaning that molecules randomly fell into place?
That I think is possible, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's possible. It's extraordinary, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's possible. There's a point in time when there was very simple life on this planet. And it went on for a long time. Nothing happens for 1 billion years. The planet's 4.5 billion years old. The first life appears about 1.5 billion years ago. And then nothing happens for 1 billion years, except these very simple life forms, until 2 of these life forms sort of fuse together.
By accident?
Apparently, by accident, right?
What else could it be?
What else could it be, right? And
love.
And the odds of this happening is like incredible, but it happened.
Do you think that the physical universe is eternal, that it's infinite in time in both directions? Or do you think there's a beginning in time,
right,
and or an end in time for the physical universe?
Again, it's way beyond my knowledge of science, right? And I think both are possible, and I don't know which one is right necessarily.
Okay. Yeah. You don't favor one view or the other?
Who am I to answer these questions? Yeah. I mean, certainly someone must have thought about this from at least philosophically, I'm sure someone has.
Yeah.
Scientifically, I'm sure someone has. I'm not aware.
So if I told you it's untenable to have infinite time behind us in the past.
Have you read this somewhere? Do you know this to be the fact?
There's a proof. Yeah, there's a philosophical proof. And it has to do with cause and effect. So you're a man of science, you believe in cause and effect.
Yeah.
Do you think your mind is only an epiphenomenon of your brain activity, or is there a supernatural component to your mind?
I think my mind is controlled by my body.
Okay.
I think that, for example, the bacterial flora in my gut affects my mind.
I have no doubt that it affects your mind, but is there anything beyond the physical?
No. Well, I mean, there's the cultural that affects my mind, right? I mean, I'm a product of the culture I live in.
But how does that get
because
to your
I
mind?
talk to people like you.
Through your five senses?
Yeah.
Which is physical?
Sure. Yeah.
So are you a materialist? Do you believe in the supernatural or not?
No, I don't believe in the supernatural.
You don't believe in the supernatural?
No,
okay.
I guess not, no.
Do you believe in randomness, true randomness?
No, I think there's some sort of order, right? Things obviously organize themselves, right? Like this cloud of stardust that we had 5 billion years ago has ordered itself into us. I mean, it's not exactly randomness, but it doesn't mean it's God either, necessarily. Well, and what I don't want to do is ascribe things that I don't know as being divine, right? Something that I don't accept.
That's not where I'm heading with this. Where I'm heading with this is that if you are a materialist and if you are an atheist, you are obligated rationally to be a determinist, meaning that there is no free will, there is no morality, there is no responsibility, there is no praise, there is no blame. To the extent that there is praise and blame, it's just the working out of that deterministic system.
And you said, if I'm an atheist, I must be a determinist, is that right? What is a determinist?
Yeah, a determinist believes that there is no uncaused effect. Every effect has a cause. The atheist doesn't have God, so therefore all of his causes are natural, which means that everything is subject to science. Everything.
Right.
Every thought that you have, every feeling that you have is, in principle, measurable in your brain activity. In principle. Everything in principle is subject to natural science. And what this does is it eliminates personal responsibility. Picture that judge slamming down his gavel and saying, "Death sentence for you, buddy." It's just a big machine working itself out. There is no real guilt in the criminal, and there's no real judgment in the judge. Nothing has any meaning. It's just a perfectly well-oiled machine running its course if you don't have the supernatural.
Right.
The problem with atheism is that they want to have their cake and eat it too. They want to deny God and deny the supernatural, but have quantum fluctuations, true randomness, and have free will, and to be able to be self-determining, and to have morality, and all these sorts of things. The problem is that you can't have both. You can have God and morality and freedom, or you can have everything being 100% natural.
So it's very binary in your mind. It's one or the other.
It's not binary in my mind, it's binary
by definition.
By definition.
Right.
Yeah, because there's no wiggle room, there's no way to escape it. Either everything is determined by natural cause and effect, or not. And if you're willing to say not, you're embracing the supernatural by definition. If you value free will and if you value morality, you owe it to yourself to start looking at the supernatural, because that is by definition involved in morality.
This is all like mental masturbation, right? Yeah. For me, it's just like, would Jesus be talking about these things, or would he just be helping others?
Yeah, he would just he'd be in his heart loving. I hope that it's clear to my friends, at least, that philosophy and playing with ideas is my hobby. And if I am pushy and annoying with my hobby, I hope that doesn't give Jesus Christ a bad name.
Right.
You know what I mean? Now, you ask where it's leading me. It's leading me to God. I mean, this is the whole point. This is the reason that I've converted. One of the contributing factors, I guess I could safely say. Jesus said, "Seek and you shall find." And when I'm exploring philosophy or even other religions, when I talk to someone with another faith, I feel like I'm exploring God. And I see God mainly in people. I'm most interested in people and in people's minds and people's hearts and in people's stories, particularly their love stories and their relationship with God and how they see differently. And when two people disagree about something, they can't both be right. They could both be wrong, but they can't both be right. I think my idea of love and friendship has to do with allowing the other person to be who they are and to appreciate that and to let them have free expression of their perspective on truth. To me, love and truth are very closely related, and what's most disappointing to me in a friendship is when someone doesn't accept my expression of truth as I see it. That's a very frustrating thing for me. That's very upsetting. So I think my idea of love has to do with freedom, truth, and also catering to basic needs.
Do you help people you love? Are you a charitable person? Do you, in your concept of loving people and loving, being a Christian, when you see someone at the metro cold and shivering, do you help them? Do you feel a need to help them? How does that work
I
for
do
you?
give them money, knowing that from my perspective, it's not the money, it's the love behind the money, it's the prayer behind the money. This physical world is so transient and so passing, and God allows suffering, and I can alleviate the sufferings of those closest to me. That's my primary duty. And if I brought home every homeless person from the metro that I met, which I'm inclined to do, my marriage would end very quickly. I could do that, but I choose not to. So I give money to the poor, and I give my friendship to the poor. I talk to them, I listen to them, and I pray for them. That's my mission as a Christian, is to pray for the true and lasting conversion of people. Pray for the holy souls in purgatory, those who have passed on, like your father. I bought you a perpetual mass for you and your family, and that includes your parents, and that includes your deceased father. So that means that if he's in purgatory right now, he's getting masses said for him every day, helping him get out of purgatory. Even now, he is grateful to me for that gesture of love, and he will pay that forward. So God only knows how all of this plays out, but I think that prayer is a very charitable act, and I take it seriously. And I think getting my friends to heaven, I can't think of anything better.
And who goes to heaven? Or what happens when we die? I guess maybe that would be a good question, but what happens?
Your soul is separated from your body. So your soul is a supernatural spirit that has no parts. It's simple, and it is created at conception.
The soul that he gave you is then transformed by you and judged by him afterwards? Is that how it works?
He gives you a soul which is subject to the domination of Satan. Because of the original sin of Adam and Eve, the soul that he gives you is worthy of hell. That's why we need baptism. So you get baptized by the church, and if you receive that sacrament worthily, and if you live your faith and you're faithful to your baptismal vows that were made on your behalf by your parents, you are cleansed by the blood of Jesus from original sin and from actual sin you committed. That's why people used to delay their baptism until later in life.
Okay, so then God looks at this and he judges you, the soul?
You're just confronting the truth about who you are, the choices you made.
So I go to God and I say, listen, I didn't do bad, I didn't do much good, I'm just sort of a normal Joe. What are you going to do with me now?
No, you'll be horrified by all of your failings, all the things you did wrong when you did evil.
Well, did I do evil in my life?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
And you'll be horrified because your eyes will be opened and you'll see it.
Okay.
And you'll be horrified about all the opportunities to do good that you didn't do. And
that I'm aware of, yeah.
And you will see all the graces that you've received. Okay.
Yeah.
And you'll be in awe of the goodness of God and how he gave you everything that he gave you.
Okay. And then, because
the outcome is heaven or hell. Those are the two outcomes.
Those are the two outcomes. Okay.
Yeah.
Are they equally populated?
We don't know.
Okay.
We don't know. I like to think that there aren't many people in hell. But if you look at the writings of the saints, a lot of them are saying that there are a lot of people going to hell. And it horrifies me to think that that's the case. But I accept it if it is the case. I like to think that people go to heaven, that people love God, and that they say yes to God. But ultimately, the church teaches that it is the choice of the individual. Either you love God and you say yes to God and you let God into your heart, or you don't. And I think that that kind of selfish, spiteful hatred is extremely rare. You talked about the bell curve. I think it's extremely rare. I like to see the bulk of humanity suffering in purgatory, but eventually going to heaven.
You're a masochist. Or a sadist.
No,
You want to see people suffer
no, it's not because
and
I
then
want
be
that.
enlightened, say.
No, it's not because I want that. It's because the holiness and the perfection that you need is remarkable. The reason it's remarkable is because it's rare. I don't want people to suffer in purgatory. That's why I'm praying for the souls in purgatory. I don't want your father to be in purgatory. But if you don't experience purification before you die, you have to experience it after you die. That's what purgatory is. So it's not a sadistic wish on my part. I don't wish anyone hell. I don't wish anyone purgatory. I wish everyone goes straight to heaven. But to do that, you need to do certain things which involve sanctification here below. For that, we have the sacraments, right? And for that, we have prayer. And for that, we have selfless, heroic virtue. So
These are your beliefs, right?
these are the teachings of the church.
And you believe them. What does that mean for you to have a belief?
For me, conversion was playing with the same ideas, but just having those assumptions change. And then the same logic applies, but you get different results. It's just the logical consequences. Just like I was talking about determinism, if you're an atheist. When you examine the basic fundamental assumptions that we all make, you may change your mind about the assumption, and then everything else will change. I like to use the example of someone who sees video footage of their beloved husband walking clearly and obviously into a whorehouse, okay? The sort of natural and excusable reaction would be, oh my God, this guy's cheating on me and he's unfaithful, and imagining all kinds of worst case scenarios. But there are actually other explanations possible. We can write a story right now that would explain it away, right? Religious faith is just, well, I don't believe that he's unfaithful. I think there's a perfectly good explanation for why he went into that place. And in my mind, his reputation is not sullied by the fact that he went in there. So it really is about who do you trust and why. And I trust God. I know who God is, and I trust God. And that knowledge of God came about because of asking the tough questions, existential questions. Who am I? Where do I come from? What is morality?
Do you think your life is important?
Yeah. Yeah, I think every human life is important. I think everything is important.
But would it make much of a difference if you died? Or whether you die in 5 years or whether you had already died 5 years ago, would it make much difference?
The most important thing in terms of the timing of my death is that I die in a state of grace. It's not a completely black and white thing. God can do whatever he wants. But if you want to go to heaven, probably it's best to strive always to do what's safest. You know, you can survive jumping out of an airplane without a parachute. I think it's better to put on the parachute. So that's what I'm trying to do.
And what happens, like, you've heard of miscarriages, right?
The church says very clearly that we leave that in God's mercy and that we trust fully in his mercy. I'm comfortable with whatever reality is. I'm very comfortable with it. Even if I go to hell, I'm comfortable with it, even though it's going to be really horrible. But I trust God, and I believe that if I end up in hell, that's the best thing that could happen. Objectively speaking. Subjectively, it's going to be the worst thing that could happen. That's why I'm trying to avoid it.
I read once a book about a German guy who had escaped to Tibet during the Second World War. And he ended up being a teacher to the Dalai Lama, the present Dalai Lama, when he was 5, 6, 7 years old. And he describes people digging a hole. So every time they'd see a bug, they'd kneel down, take the bug, put it aside, keep digging the hole. You know, different faiths have different ways of seeing all these questions that you've pondered deeply about, right?
Yeah.
And to someone from the outside looking at it, who's right?
I think it's important to make our decision not based on are you vegetarian or not. I think we need to go deeper. What is the best case scenario and what is the worst case scenario? If there's no difference between the best case scenario and the worst case scenario, then there is by definition no basis for morality, period. And you can do what you want. The outcome will be the same.
What about cultures who don't have this concept? Are they more vicious than Catholics? When you look at it as an anthropologist, do you see people who don't have concepts of heaven and hell being more violent?
I see people as people. Everyone has the same source and the same goal.
Life and death?
No,
Source is life?
No, the source is God and the goal is God.
Okay.
So everyone was created gratuitously by God, and everyone is destined for God. Everyone. And so the window dressing, I'm an atheist, I'm a Buddhist, I'm this, that's just a very thin veneer over the human heart. In that heart of hearts, God knows if you love him. God knows what you're doing and when you're being selfish and when you're not, and when you're sacrificing and when you're not. And that's the only thing that matters.
Actions don't matter.
Your actions do matter. Your actions flow from that. But in terms of action, I can't tell the difference between an atheist and a Buddhist or a Catholic. I can't, because they're all creatures of God, and they all have conscience, right? I don't think that I'm better than anyone else. I don't think that I am more important or that I do more, I don't. I think we're all in the exact same boat. I just am aware. So when it comes time for judgment, I'll be judged more harshly than the Buddhist, because the Buddhist wasn't aware of what God is and what God wants, right?
What do you think Jesus would do if he was here today, in this world that we live in? Would he be a critic of the church, you think?
In the book of Revelation, the last book in the Christian Bible, Jesus chastises the churches because of either their lack of faith or their selfishness or their hypocrisy. That's a big one, right? If you look at the life of Jesus, it's always Jesus coming down really, really hard on his people, the Jews, the Pharisees, the scribes, the hypocrites, right? And being very, very gentle to the prostitutes and the sinners, the regular people, because the Jews are the chosen people. They've been entrusted with the truth, and so they're subject to more criticism. And it's the same thing in the book of Revelation. When these first Christian churches are growing up, they're in a privileged position, and they should know better. And so they're getting chastised by Jesus. I think if you read the history of the papacy, if you read the history of the councils, if you read the history of the church in general, you'll see that the church is always struggling, and it's always full of sinners. And as a Catholic, I need to reconcile that reality, that gritty, ugly reality, with the other side of the coin, which is that it is the mystical body of Christ, it's the bride of Christ, it's a perfect society, it's infallible. So there are two sides to that coin always, I think, in this fallen world. So I'm very comfortable with that, and I think that if Jesus were here today, he would recognize the good, and he would recognize the evil, and he would chastise the selfish hypocrites, myself included. So I welcome that wholeheartedly. And that's part of the day-to-day humility of being Christian, is knowing that judgment is coming. It could happen right now before you've done the sentence. Jesus could come again. So we need to be ready. That's the sense of urgency that we have as Christians, or that we should have.
How do you feel about the Christians that are persecuted in this world? And I guess more broadly, anyone who's persecuted, really, whether they be Jews or Muslims, or there's a lot of religious persecution. Yeah. And what are you doing to try to counter that? Or
number one is prayer. I know you don't think highly of prayer, but I think very highly of prayer. And Jesus said that the persecuted are blessed, and that they should sing and dance and rejoice. Wow. If they're persecuted for his name, for Jesus' name. I think that Jesus loves the devout Jew, the devout Muslim. God knows what his relationship is with that individual. If that individual is suffering, he sees the suffering of his son. And I think that Jesus is to be found most in those that are persecuted, those that are suffering, those that are betrayed, those that are misunderstood, and in the poor and the weak. And that's the way that the church teaches me to see the underprivileged. So I like to ask my guests to just wrap up with a little final thought. What would you say to anyone who's listening?
There's some beautiful things you've said, right? And there's some things that just seem frankly ridiculous to me. And I leave this conversation feeling no more faith than I did before, right? I spoke to a woman, and she's a Catholic, a wonderful woman, and they would clean the feet of the homeless people, right? They'd bandage them up. They would give them new socks that they had knitted and send them off again. That is sainthood, right?
Yeah.
She was doing something to help someone.
Yeah.
Talking about, whether or not your soul, is ripped apart from your body. It all seems very fantastic and totally useless. I think, Jesus would laugh at us. Just relax, and just try to help other people. Try to lead a good, honest life. Be helpful. And, your life will be over soon enough anyways, right? Make the best of it while you're here, right? And try to save the planet. And that's the big worry for me, is that this planet's going to implode. That's what we've got to avoid. A lot more than figuring out if I should be a Muslim or a Christian or a Jew or a whatever, right? This planet, this is the ark. It's all we got.
If you like your worldview, if you think it's swell, if you got some questions, ask me and I'll tell. All you got to do is ask. All you got to do is ask.